From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
Hello, and welcome to another WisPolitics Capital Chats podcast brought to you by Spectrum. I'm Abigail Levins, and I'm here in the office to talk about an interview I did with Washington County Executive Josh Schoemann, who is currently running for governor as a Republican candidate. He spoke with me about his background, how he got into the race, and what he would do as governor. Let's get to the interview. I want to start with what people are talking about this week and the past couple weeks, honestly, in Wisconsin is the budget negotiations. Tell me, as someone who is hoping to be pretty involved in those, if you win this race, what do you make of what's happening right now?
Well, it's disheartening to me that always that it's headline news every time the governor and the legislative leaders meet. Thank goodness they're meeting. That's a good thing. But I think that's one of the things that's got to be changed. And one of the reasons I think Tony Evers has failed Wisconsin is, it's a lack of that communication constantly happening. And instead, we're getting to this point. We're now just over 30 days away from needing a new state budget for a variety of reasons, a variety of departments, or a variety of local governments that rely on that. And just now we're hearing the news of them meeting. So I think that's one of the things that's got to start. But unfortunately, this governor and this legislature are so far apart from one another that waiting this long really puts the whole entire state in a state of flux and in jeopardy. And those are certainly things that I would change really very early on.
Sure, and I want to talk more about how you would work with the legislature a little later on, but first, I want people listening to get to know you a little bit. Tell me about your background. Currently, you serve as the Washington County executive. What did you do before that?
Yeah, so I've been the county executive here in Washington County for the last 5 years. Before that, I was in a different role with the county. I was the county administrator and also county administrative coordinator. So I think I have the prestigious title of being the only person in Wisconsin history to ever hold all three in one county. But I've been at the county then I'm in my 12th year with county government here in Washington County. And prior to that, I was the village administrator in Richfield, which is one of our southernmost communities in Washington County. And before that, I was the city administrator, clerk, treasurer, and director of public works in Princeton, Wisconsin, in Green Lake County. So I've been in public service my entire adult professional career, which I dedicated my life to public service to earn back the service and sacrifice of the guys and gals who didn't make it home from Iraq and Afghanistan, either in whole or in part, and loving my neighbor in reflection of my love from Jesus Christ. So, those are things that are really important to me, and that's what I try to do each and every day as county executive and serving my neighbors.
What made you make the jump from, okay, I've been serving as county executive, now I want to run for governor?
Yeah, it actually kind of goes back to your first question, because one of the things that I think has made Washington County so successful, especially in the last 5 years, but in the last 12 that I've been here at the county, is that we work really hard to bring folks together to solve really complex issues, whether it's road funding or municipal funding in general, working on our two-year campus of our UW, our nursing home, county nursing home that is now private sector. All of those things entailed really sticky and difficult issues, sometimes very emotional issues, and really required people to come together and kind of talk through the complexities and the intricacies of each issue. And so that's what we've done in each and every case. And we're not afraid to have difficult conversations. Sometimes they get loud, but I think that's an important process in our democracy, in our republic, to bring folks together to kind of work through issues. We haven't seen that for quite some time. Now I would say if you'd have to go back quite several decades since you've seen that kind of leadership of bringing people together from all different sides of an issue. But I think that's really what we're required now here in Wisconsin and across America. It's so divisive. Everybody talks about it all the time. We've created all these barriers, and I think it's really time to build bridges. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that from this governor, and I think that's the kind of change we really need.
Yeah, and as you've started campaigning, What have you been hearing from people that are issues that would be important to them?
Well, the thing that I've heard for months and months and months now, and really helped me make this decision about running, is people's concern about both the whole spectrum, from their kids all the way to retirees leaving the state. Young people graduating high school, graduating college, leaving the state for opportunities in other states, predominantly, some largely in the Midwest, but all across the country, that they can't find here in Wisconsin. And then our retirees leaving the state because they can't afford to stay. I often hear the term tax hell. Wisconsin is a tax hell. You know, we've made progress in a number of different areas. There's no doubt about that. But we're still, our property taxes are still eighth highest in the country. Income tax, embarrassingly, is significantly higher than Illinois, who of course has a flat tax and we don't. And of course they're even worse off in many ways. But I think our people fleeing the state for other states and other places. I really want Wisconsin to be a place that people are proud to be, not just be from.
Yeah. And what are ways you've been finding to connect with voters outside of your area of southeastern Wisconsin?
Well, I think you need to go to them, and that's another thing that I think we've really struggled with candidates for some time now, kind of having that retail politics, burning the shoe leather, burning rubber across the state, just trying to meet people where they're at, in their on their back patio or at their kitchen table or local tavern or local diner, and just listening. That's been really what I've tried to do here in the first 3 weeks and 3 days of this campaign. Is certainly they want to know about my background and my biography, but I want to hear from them what their hopes and dreams for the state are. What's changed over time in their experience, and how do we make improvements to keep them here, to keep their kids here, to bring them back. Because if you look at the demography of the state in the next 20 to 30 years, it's pretty concerning. Even, for example, school enrollments, under the education governor, almost in every metric of performance, our schools have gotten worse from kindergarten all the way through graduating college. And that's a big concern I hear from people, is how do we make those improvements so that our kids are prepared for whatever's next in life, in their career here in Wisconsin, and the opportunities for jobs here in Wisconsin. So, I think that's been a big part of what I wanted to do, is hear how we make those improvements from their perspective, how they have more local control. And so that's what I plan to do for the rest of this campaign. Is no one will outwork me in this campaign, and it'll all about being focused on people.
Sure. And one more campaign question before I ask a few issue-specific questions. Wisconsin has
Yeah.
made national news for how expensive a lot of our statewide races are. How do you feel about the race ahead of you in terms of, can you fundraise enough? Are you confident in your ability to do that? Any other aspects of the race you'd be nervous about as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the answer is no, you can never fundraise enough, or at least it seems like that here in this state, right? I've pretty been drilled into my head pretty clearly from every avenue of some people I've talked to, that this is probably for a 30 or $40 million race just for the candidate. And it has the potential to be a $250 million race from all spending from all sides. That's honestly, it's just embarrassing that that's kind of the state of politics in Wisconsin. It'll be a little different now in some ways, I suppose, than maybe the most recent Supreme Court race, where it was the only thing happening in the whole country. But still, nonetheless, $250 million of spending on any race, it just seems like a waste. And that, I do hear that from people all the time. Those are dollars that could be going to actually help people, improve people's lives here in the state, and instead we're spending it on TV ads and literature that they just get and throw out anyway. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be a huge high bar. In Washington County in the last 5 years, I went from um, having basically no name ID to in the last 5 years that I've been there, raising almost $400,000, scaling that up statewide. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, but that's exactly why I got into this race as early as I did. Unfortunately, that too is the new reality here in the United States. You see in Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy has jumped in. Byron Donalds down in Florida, John James in Michigan, Andy Biggs in Arizona. I mean, we can keep going on, but it's the new normal. Jump in early and raise as much money as you possibly can because these are $250 million races, I guess.
Yeah, and I want to talk about a few issues if you were elected governor, how you would handle them. And you mentioned education, and I was curious about
Yeah.
your take on that. Governor Evers has claimed to be education governor and has proposed billions of dollars towards funding education. What do you make of some of these more specific goals, like funding education, school vouchers, how funding should be allocated? Because I know you mentioned that you're not satisfied with the education progress of the state.
Well, yes, that's right. I mean, there hasn't been progress. We've actually devolved in terms of outcomes for kids, and everybody across the board. I think even the governor has acknowledged that performance has gone backwards in almost every metric in the last 6 years, and so much so that the Secretary of Department of Instruction, his handpicked successor, had to lower the standards, and then he wouldn't even make that veto to set it back to his own standards. So I think there's a failure across the board from somebody who not only ran on that platform but has celebrated himself as the education governor. It's kind of embarrassing. Having been a school board superintendent, excuse me, a school board president in the past, this is one area I'm very passionate about. My oldest son was a graduate from Hartford Union High School, our public school, and my youngest son is at Kettle Moraine Lutheran High School. And I value greatly having that choice for kids. But I think our funding system, it's not a money issue. If it was a money issue, you look at Milwaukee Public Schools where we're throwing money left over right, and voters are even approving referendums, and this is happening all across the state. Money is not the problem. It's what we're incentivizing. I think the system that we've built for funding our schools, is a model that was adopted back in the 90s, and even goes farther back into the 70s. That is not going to be the model that can possibly sustain us into the 2040s and the 2050s. Even if you just look demographically, there's less and less kids. Here in West Bend is one example. There's just over 500 graduates in a couple weeks here that are currently seniors. The incoming freshman class next year has about 350, just under 350 students. That kind of precipitous decline exists all across Wisconsin. So how do you fund a system with declining enrollments really across the board, all across the state on the whole? I think that's the challenge that we have to look at. But more importantly, how do we incentivize better outcomes for kids? And again, the only way you solve that is by bringing people together from all different aspects. There's a lot of different lenses to look through, but the one that we should be most focused on is our students and their opportunities for careers in the future.
Sure. And obviously, to get any of that done, you'll have to work with the legislature. And right now, there's a Republican majority, but there's not a guarantee of that. Some people have discussed that there might be a Democratic majority. How do you think, you mentioned you're disappointed in how the current governor is doing it. How do you think, regardless of what the majority is in the legislature, you'll be working with them to get things passed, like your education agenda or state budget?
Yeah, I disappointed is probably a mild way of describing it. But it goes back to how and if we have conversations about change and reform. And I think one thing that I've been impressed with President Trump is his willingness to cut deals. We're seeing this playing out in real time with Senator Johnson, digging his heels in, I think appropriately so, on federal spending. And I'm quite confident the president's going to cut some kind of a deal to bring along those U.S. senators. I think the same kinds of conversation have to happen at the state. I think I'm the candidate on the Republican side that can actually excite the base and bring Republican majorities along. But even if that weren't to happen, we've got a history in the state of people working across the aisle. I think it's completely possible, but you have to have an open door and you have to be willing to talk. It cannot be headline news when leadership meets with one another. And like it or not, the governor of the state of Wisconsin is the leader elected by the people of all of Wisconsin. That's the office that has to initiate the conversation and require it. I think we owe it to the people of the state to do those types of things. That's exactly the kind of governor we'll be.
Yeah. Josh, that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you for your time and answering all these questions about the race and about kind of your intentions for governor.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
All right, thanks for listening to that interview. If you want to hear more about the governor race for 2026 in Wisconsin, you can head to our website at wispolitics.com. For now, I'm Abigail Levins, and thanks for listening to this episode of WisPolitics Capital Chats brought to you by Spectrum.